So after the Quiet on Set documentary came out, Drake dropped his music video. He released his music video. So it's not hard to see how Drake is using the Quiet on Set doc as a way to restart his career, as a way to have a comeback. And I think it's really important for us to understand that we should feel deeply empathetic for Drake as a victim of sex abuse when he was a child, and understand how much trauma that inflicted on him, and, you know, listen to him and listen to his story and know that what happened to him was wrong. Okay, it's important we do that. But then we don't have to stop at that. It's not a binary. It's not black or white. It's not like Drake Bell good or Drake Bell bad. And so, considering the fact that Drake now is using this as his comeback, so many comments on his music video, so many comments on TikTok, so many comments just everywhere online that are talking about Drake's comeback, about how happy people are to have him back, about how everybody knows now what happened to him and we're all on his side. And there's no space at all for Drake to be an abuser himself in that equation. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Yeah. So I want to quickly look through both Kat and Steven's pieces that we're going to be discussing here in like 15 minutes. Drake Bell accusers face online attacks after Quiet on Set docuseries. Okay. Supporters of former Nickelodeon star Drake Bell have rallied behind him after he came forward with his child's sexual abuse story in an explosive docuseries. But some people have gone to extremes, harassing women who previously shared their own abuse allegations against Bell, who pleaded guilty to attempted child endangerment in 2021. In the wake of Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, dozens of TikTok videos have been published discussing the child endangerment case, casting doubt on his alleged victim's claims of abuse against Bell. Something that is very concerning to me is when onlookers who are online and who are determining guilt and innocence and are absolute in their legal analysis are doing so based off of limited information and based off of appearances and based off of what their what is going to fit their purview. And so because what Drake ended up pleading guilty to in pretrial to avoid trial is not the totality of the allegations against him, of which he was arrested for and then was facing trial, because those don't line up exactly, then therefore people online have determined that Drake is innocent. And I think something to keep in mind is that when somebody pleads guilty to avoid trial, that then seals the evidence that would be used in trial. And that means then often that the accused are pleading to lesser charges, and that's why they plead guilty. Unfortunately, this happens all the time in the legal system because no one wants a trial. Nobody wants to go to trial. So if possible, then the prosecution, the defense, the judge, if there is an agreement that can be made on a guilty plea during pretrial, then that will be the case, like Epstein. Yes. So I want to maintain that I myself won't say with 100% certainty what crimes were exactly committed against the 15-year-old girl who accused Drake and who was 12 when they met and started spending time together, because I don't have all the details. That's sealed. We don't know. But we do know that he did commit crimes against children, against a child, and that he did plead guilty to a felony and a misdemeanor charge. Thanks for that context. Of course. I mean, I really just, this is so alarming to me that there are TikTok videos with millions and millions of views and thousands of comments smearing not just this girl who is off of social media. After she released her statement during the Zoom hearing where Drake pled guilty, she got to give her full statement. That was it. She disappeared. And all of these TikTok videos supporting Drake are smearing her and smearing anybody who has made who has accused Drake, including his ex-girlfriend Melissa Lingefelt, who she was 16. She was 16 years old when Drake started dating her and he was 20. I think that's just important to note, okay? So Drake, even though, okay, only 4-year difference there, he has a history and a propensity for being attracted to young girls, to teenagers. So I think it's just important to review what Melissa Langefeld's allegations were here. And again, there are so many stories like hers that are very similar in regards to the behavior, the violent, abusive behavior of Drake Bell. And so we have to look at patterns here. We have to consider when there are multiple allegations against a famous man, and when there are through lines throughout those allegations. They say none of that in the documentary. Of course they weren't going to, because they needed Drake Bell. They brush over that in the documentary, and they allow him instead, with that platform, to say most of what's out there is just misinformation. They let him give his side, and basically his side, you know, it's brief, but he's like, yeah, no, it's not true. The media lied. When in reality, a lot of misinformation is coming from his own supporters. Okay, so back in 2020, Melissa Lingefelt told her story. The two dated from August 2006 to February 2009, when she was 16 years old, is when they started dating. She fills the video with photos of her and Bell from that period while narrating. First off, I would like to start out with saying I don't really care if anyone believes me, as this is my story and my life and something that I went through. It wasn't until recently that I actually realized that abuse isn't something that all women have to go through. When I started dating Drake, I was 16. I was homeschooled. I moved in with him. I was singing. It wasn't until about a year when the verbal abuse started. When I say verbal abuse, I mean imagine the worst type of verbal abuse that you could ever imagine, and that was what I got. It then turned into physical, hitting, throwing everything. Hitting, throwing everything. At the pinnacle of it, he dragged me down the stairs of our house in Los Feliz. My face hit every step on the way down. I have photos. I don't even want to get into the underage girls thing. I mean, I will, but I'm scared. In a TikTok preceding this one, Lingefelt wrote, "Think you can hurt my feelings? I lived with and dated an alcoholic, abusive Drake Bell from 16 to 19. And in the documentary, Drake does acknowledge that in dealing with the trauma from his abuse, he went down a very bad path. He was abusing substances. He doesn't say he was abusing women, but he absolutely points to the fact that he was on a dark path and that he is now trying to recover from that and come back from that. After posting her confessional on August 12th, Lingefelt has posted more TikToks sharing DMs from witnesses to her alleged abuse and other victims coming forward with their own stories. One anonymous message accuses Bell of statutory rape, saying, "I met Drake in early 2000 when I was 16. He was dating you at the time." This is about, he was dating you as in Melissa. "Didn't stop him from fucking my 15-year-old friend who was a virgin. I believe you, and I'm so sorry for what you endured and what my friend endured, because that was statutory rape." Another also accuses him of sleeping with a 15-year-old when he was 20. Another anonymous message says, "Here goes nothing. A couple years ago, Drake was performing at a benefit concert for my high school back when I was in the 8th grade. The entire concert, Drake wasn't who you'd expect him to be like. After the concert, all I remember is that I met Drake and he raped me. I was in fucking 8th grade. This guy that I had idolized as a kid was a rapist. He was a fucking sicko." In another TikTok, Lingefelt shares a DM conversation between her and another one of Bell's ex-girlfriends, Peyton Lane Lopachin, who dated Bell for 5 years. In the DM conversation, Lopachin reaches out to Lingefelt to say, "I will stand by your side and back you up as I went through the same horrific verbal, physical, and mental abuse." She writes that she was manipulated and brainwashed, and when Lingefelt replies, "He had sex with hundreds of underage girls," Lopachin answers, "Yes." Lopachin also writes, "There were so many days where I thought, Melissa went through this and she got out, and he called me a cunt and loved to call me a whore." Another one of Bell's ex-girlfriends, Jillian Leos, reached out to support Lingefelt and share her own experience, writing, "I know this to be true from personal experience. We went to high school together and dated from 2001 to 2005, 2006, from the ages of 16 to about 21. Thank you for speaking out. I wish I had more receipts. I have some photos. Unfortunately, no voicemails or texts because he broke every phone I had back then. Like you, I have many friends and witnesses to attest what he put me through," adding, "He is a narcissistic sociopath, and I know that there are more of us out there." Bell replied to the allegations, telling people that he never abused my ex-girlfriend or did so many of the other things Melissa falsely claimed on her TikTok video. Yeah. So there are just countless stories and allegations against Drake that point to him as an adult preying on young girls or, you know, dating girls who he allegedly abused, and in very similar ways. And I cannot stress enough that being abused in your childhood does not mean that you will grow up to become an abuser. It is referred to as breaking the cycle of abuse, and many people do it. In fact, most people who are abused in childhood do not grow up to become abusers themselves. But a disproportionate number of adult abusers were abused in their childhoods. Do we understand the distinction there? So most child victims of abuse don't grow up to become adult abusers, but when looking at adult abusers, a disproportionate number of them faced abuse in their childhoods. Okay, I don't have time to read through both of these, but basically Kat's piece is an overview on which includes Drake Bell's own abuse story regarding Brian Peck, and then the accusations against Bell, and then also the crimes that he pled guilty to. And then Steven's piece specifically talks about a conspiracy video that Drake Bell embedded in his music video that Drake Bell or someone from his team embedded in his music video that he dropped the day after the docuseries aired. And I think it's very important to note that Matt Wallace, the guy who made this conspiracy video called Matt Wallace Exposes Fake Allegations Against Drake Bell. Oh, Matt Wallace, if you know who that is a dangerous conspiracy theorist who focuses on trafficking in false narratives about pedophile elites and incorrectly labeled images. And here's an example of one of his latest tweets that has almost 100,000 likes. This is the same guy. This is after the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore was hit and collapsed. And he tweeted, in 2023, the Obamas produced a movie called Leave the World Behind, where a cyber attack causes a massive container ship to lose power and crash. 5 months later, a massive container ship loses power and crashes into Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, causing a deadly collapse. And then he has a whole, like, Rumble thing, you know, posted on Rumble, linking Barack Obama to the Francis Scott Key Bridge crash. So this is just one example of the kind of conspiracy theories that Matt Wallace, what's that noise? That Matt Wallace pushes. And Matt Wallace is the guy who made this conspiracy video saying that the allegations against Drake are cooked up by like Nickelodeon executives or by Brian. Sorry, there is like some sound playing right now. What the fuck? It sounds like an ice cream truck. I know it's not though. All right, it's 10 o'clock, so I gotta make sure I can get this Zoom thing working. Okay. I think in order to pull up my... It's Obama! It is Obama. Okay, let me turn off this camera, and then I think that's how I'll be able to pull up Zoom. So I think I gotta go dark on that. Go react. Nope. Gotta go dark here. Oh. Okay. Start. Let's hope that my video works. Failed to start the video camera. Okay, very cool. I might have to do the thing where, how do I turn my camera off here? Let's see. This is so frustrating. Deactivate. Okay, and then how do I get it to pull up here? Yep. Okay. Great. Okay. Do this. Fuck, why is my Zoom freezing? Oh, everything's freezing. Oh, hold on. Fudge. Why is this freezing? Okay, classic. 1 second, guys. Go react. Okay, there I am. Okay, I'm just gonna check. I'm gonna let Steven in. Why is this frozen? Okay, hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
How's it going?
Excellent. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Making it through the week.
Oh, yeah.
And we're here.
We are. Let me just check and see if Kat... Okay, she is not running behind, so she should be here in a minute. All right. Let me just make sure I got every... Oh, there she is. Okay. Boom. Connecting. Hello.
Hi.
Everybody can hear, everybody can see.
Yeah.
All
We're
right.
good.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, good morning to the both of you. Or Kat, I know you're East Coast.
Yeah.
So I guess
I'm the
it's...
same.
Yes.
Are you, Steven, are you also East Coast?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So it's morning here in California. I'm also a super late night owl, so it feels very morning here.
I'm sure.
Every
10
time,
a.m. on a Saturday is a morning.
every time I do a morning stream, my EU viewers are very excited because I don't stream until late at night, so they can never catch my streams. So I tell them, this one's for you guys. This one's exactly for you. Okay, so real quickly, let me do some introductions here. So, Steven, is your last name is pronounced Asarch?
Asarch.
Asarch, okay. So we have
Yeah.
Steven Asarch, you guys, chat, who is a freelance internet culture reporter, and you are a self-professed person who lives on Twitch and YouTube.
Yeah, it's a sin.
Yes, you live online, but
but-
you're talking to people who also are. We're your people.
That's good.
Yeah, we understand this. We also live online. Many of us on Twitch and YouTube.
Yeah.
And you have written for IBT Media, Newsweek, and Insider, which, Kat, you also came from Insider, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Steven and I were on the Insider Digital Culture team together.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So you guys go way back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you forged your lives and as writers in the fire together. And then you produced a docuseries on Discovery Plus as well. So you're not just a writer, but you're a producer as well. And then Kat, you are a tech and culture reporter for NBC News, and you previously worked at Insider, and you specialize in writing on internet culture and influencers. And you basically, whenever I am talking about a celebrity or an influencer who has done something bad on stream, you've usually written a piece about it. We're very
that's like
simpatico
how
on that. Yeah.
Yes, that's how I used to describe my beat to people. Was I was like, if somebody did something wrong, then like I will be there.
Yes, especially when that person is a public figure, and specifically in the internet or celebrity space. And that is why today we're going to be discussing Drake Bell. So, Kat, I first saw your piece, and then to my community, some of you may recognize Kat from the last time I brought her on, and we were talking about the AI situation when it happened to Taylor Swift and the Swifties mobilized. And so we had a discussion about that, and now today we're going to be discussing Drake Bell, because Kat, you wrote a piece for NBC News, and then Steven, you also wrote a piece for Passion Fruit, more specifically about the conspiracy video and the one that was in Drake Bell's music video that he dropped the day after the Quiet on Set series came out, and how he has been in comments and in DMs trying to make sure that nothing stops his comeback. So that is what we're going to be discussing here today. And I guess we'll just start off by saying both of you watched the Quiet on Set series, I presume. Yes. Before you watched the series, were you guys aware of Drake's sordid history and the fact that he had multiple allegations against him and that he had pled guilty to these crimes against a minor? Were you both already aware of that?
Yeah, on my count, I was definitely aware of Dan Schneider. There have been so many YouTube video essays, Jay Aubrey, and they've just kind of stuck around, and Drake Bell stuff sort of into that as well. I've watched all insane hours of Quentin review stuff about the Nickelodeon. So the Drake Bell stuff has always kind of been in the outlier. But I was never like aware of how serious the claims were, I think, until I started doing the digging for the story and really seeing how kind of nasty the whole thing is. Because I think when you deal with a lot of like essay claims online, it can be a lot of he said, she said, and we don't get the legal situation very rarely comes into it. But with this, it's like much clearer.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mhm.
we have a court case, we have a guilty plea, which is kind of rare when it comes to this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know. I knew that Drake had had like some controversies over the years, but I didn't know that much about them. However, I knew because this is something that isn't talked about a lot, but in the years, around the same time that all of this Dan Schneider stuff was popping up online, Drake at one point did a tour of high schools around the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to my high school.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
wasn't Yes. So I wasn't there at the time. I had graduated like the year before, but some of my friends who were still at high school have told me this story like numerous times about how bizarre it was that just like one day Drake Bell did like this little assembly in front of all the kids in my high school. And that is not something that's been like thoroughly reported on yet, but it is definitely part of some of the things I've seen online about this.
Yeah, something that I noticed when looking back at and trying to find all these stories and all these allegations against Drake, because a lot of it is getting buried now due to the Quiet on Set docuseries. If you type in Drake Bell abuse, every single search result is going to be about Brian Peck. It's going to be about Nickelodeon. It's going to be about Quiet on Set. So even the court case, even his guilty plea is all getting buried. But anyway, what I found are there are numerous stories that have so many things in common, and stories from girls who, same thing, Drake Bell came to their high school. It was really weird. Girls who were fans of his, but then were, aware enough to recognize that this is very strange behavior from an adult. And him, not just at high schools, but how he would be at his concerts. Lots of stories of him taking underage girls backstage. Previous girlfriends of his who have alleged physical and emotional abuse, and just the commonalities between all these stories. Before we jumped on Zoom here, I had reminded my chat that not only does he have this, not only did he plead guilty to a felony and misdemeanor charge involving crimes against a minor, but one of his ex-girlfriends, Melissa Lingfelt, in 2020 came out with her story and her allegations, and she was 16 years old when she started dating him, and he was 20. So we see a pattern here. And when Melissa came out with her story, it prompted a flood of other stories from girls that he had previously dated, to girls whose high schools that he had gone to, girls who had gone to his concerts, girls who had stories about friends of theirs. I mean, there were just so many. It's impossible to ignore the pattern of behavior. So, that being said, you guys then saw everything that was going on with Quiet on Set, and how people online now are attempting to either minimize Drake's past, which includes his guilty plea, or just completely erase it and now say that none of it was true, and that the victim, who was 12 when they had met and started formed a relationship, and then 15 when she accused him of these crimes, and it was going to go to trial, calling her a liar, absolutely denying every single thing she has claimed, denying the fact that he's guilty at all, which is incredibly alarming. It is so alarming to see this erasure being done now. And I wonder, like, do you guys think that these are people who have always supported Drake Bell, like, his stands or whatnot? Or is there a new wave of people who watched Quiet on Set, which was about 16 million people who watched it, who now, in the aftermath of learning what happened to Drake Bell and having all this empathy for him, of course, as we should, are not able to are not able to hold space for the fact that he perpetuated the cycle of abuse that happened to him? Like, do you guys think it's a new wave of people?
Yeah, I think it's definitely more people. Quiet on
Hmm.
Set sort of brought it back into the public consciousness. I think a lot of millennials my age and younger definitely watched the Amanda Show and Drake and Josh
Mm-hmm.
and sort of had this parasocial relationship with Drake Bell. It's always been there. It's sort of the same thing with Depp and Heard, where people always had this connection with this guy that they've never met. And when they feel that they're, parasocial idol is getting unnecessary flack for things that they feel are unjustified, they tend to flock to the corpse and try to get as much out of it as they can. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's weird. Drake Bell has sort of remained popular mostly in Mexico
Yes,
over the
yes,
past decade. That's
yes.
basically like if you read what's left of the court filings, basically all of his concerts were in Mexico. He just kind of was popular there. But Quiet on Set has now introduced that side of the story, and it did a very bad job of talking about the allegations that um, from this court case.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're only getting your information from Quiet on Set and your parasocial relationship from Drake Bell when you were a kid, and you put those two together, hey, it could be easy to dismiss the claims of what this 15-year-old said. So I think it's a bit of both, but it's definitely a newer crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also think that one thing about this online environment around Quiet on Set, but also preceding the docuseries, is you find this with a lot of internet discourse about crimes against children and criminal behavior in general. There's a real lens of conspiracy that gets applied
Mhm.
to everything. And I understand, like, I'm empathetic to why people jump to the kind of that conspiracy mindset because it just fits in so well with these established conspiracies. Like, for example, Hollywood is full of people who abuse children. And that's not exactly untrue, as
Right,
we can see.
right.
Mhm.
There are people in Hollywood who do abuse children. I also think that there are people in every industry
Mm-hmm.
and in every community who abuse children. But in this case, a lot of the discourse I've been seeing around, for example, the trial and the sentencing footage online, like on TikTok, you have all these viral videos
Yeah.
where they're taking the footage from Drake Bell's 2021 sentencing and they're ripping it apart and they're ripping the victim in that case apart. And I think that part of where that desire comes from is I keep seeing these common threads of conspiracy where people are saying, like, it was Nickelodeon who set this all up to make Drake look like he's not a real victim, or
Mm-hmm.
like Brian Peck, the person who was convicted for abusing Drake, like he's behind all of this. Like all of this is just trying to make Drake look like he's not a real victim. And I think what's so ironic and sad about that is we can accept that Drake was a victim of the system on Nickelodeon and that he was a victim of this man, Brian Peck. What the people who are doing this are actually themselves perpetuating is they won't let these other victims be victims. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who are saying, like, we want Drake to be a perfect victim, and because we want him to be a perfect victim, that means he didn't hurt anyone else. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
innocent. Drake is just a victim and there's nothing more complicated about it than that. But the reality is that although victims are not overwhelmingly likely to perpetuate new crimes, people who perpetuate these types of crimes against children, they are more likely to have been victimized in their own youth.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing play out is not irregular. It's not a conspiracy. It's actually, this is like a good teaching moment for people to see how the cycle of abuse actually tends to perform.
Yeah, I made that distinction to my community. I said it's really important to understand that being abused in childhood does not automatically mean you will become an abuser. It's called breaking the cycle. And in fact, most people who were abused in childhood don't grow up to become abusers, but a disproportionate number of adult abusers were abused in childhood. And to me, it's something where I actually would, maybe it's my naivety, I should learn by now how people online behave, but I would think that it would almost be this understanding of, oh, Drake was abused as a child. He did not receive proper treatment. You can hear in his own words him talk about how he went down a very dark path, how he was abusing substances, how he was making decisions that were not good. And he does not, of course, say that he was abusing women, but it's not hard to see how that could have been the case, that he did exactly what had happened to him. And coupled with the fact that he did not receive the mental health treatment that he needed to overcome his own abuse, that just then cycled out of control. And now here you have an adult Drake who, so many of the stories of the girls who he allegedly victimized were the exact same age as him when Brian Peck victimized him. I mean, you can just see these, you see the parallels there. And so to me, I would have thought there would have been that understanding. And in fact, the work would have been to remind people that not every abused person becomes an abuser. Like that to me would be okay, we must remember that being abused as a child does not mean that you will then automatically grow up to become an abuser. And in fact, now it's the other way around, where your piece and other people who are talking about this are having to bring up this fact that, and it's because people are not able to they can only see it as black and white. They can only see it as good or as bad. They feel as if I don't know, maybe they themselves are incapable, or they believe that other people are not capable of understanding this nuance and understanding that both of these things can be true. And unfortunately, this is the case more than once, that you have an adult abuser who was abused in childhood.
Yes. I also feel like people don't realize that the consequence of what they're doing is in itself like perpetuating this cycle, because in order to break the cycle, the person who was abused has to no longer abuse others. And when you look at some of the circumstances around Drake Bell, around like how he was received as an underage victim, people in his community were not supportive. People enabled Brian Peck to abuse him both within Nickelodeon and seemingly within Drake's like interpersonal life. So a lot of people failed Drake. And then even when Brian Peck was convicted, after he got out, he was able to continue working with children. So you see how the circumstances around Drake's situation didn't allow him to heal, didn't allow him to process, didn't allow him to feel supported. And what people are doing now to the people who have come forward as victims of Drake is they're not giving them support. They're not giving them the tools to process, the tools to heal, the tools to move on. The victim in the 2021 case, she, from everything we know, she doesn't want this to like be brought up in the way that it's being brought up on TikTok now, but people aren't letting her move on. And so I'm like, in this case, the onlookers, people don't want to take responsibility for how their actions can influence like the world around them, especially online. But we see time and time again that this environment of not supporting the victims and actually trying to discredit the victims and further abuse the victims, this is, we're like watching the abuse be perpetuated.
I think it is now it is now something we're seeing all the time. And I think the Amber versus Johnny trial blew the doors open on now this phenomenon of people online being judge, jury, and executioner, despite what has actually happened in like real trials. And so because of that, because of the way that the social media, the tide on social media turned against Amber, it's not hard to see how that potentially affected the trial in the U.S. after Johnny had been convicted of defamation or of libel in the UK. Like, he was found guilty. But when the trial moved to the U.S. and social media caught wind of everything, and it became this just firestorm of anti-Amber content. I mean, people were getting hundreds of thousands to millions of views on their anti-Amber Heard content. And now that established like the status quo for things. So you look at Angelina Jolie's allegations against Brad Pitt. You look at Evan Rachel Wood against Marilyn Manson. You look at Cassidy Hutchinson against Donald Trump. You look at Drake Bell's accusers, and then you look at non-celebrity women, and they are all being referred to by this same online mob as Amber 2.0. It's now any woman, famous or not, who accuses a powerful man, or even just a man, now gets this label put on them as being Amber 2.0. And it's I don't know, it's really very scary to see how definitive people online are behaving towards selective evidence, and towards, and these are people who don't have law degrees. They don't have they weren't there during the trial. They don't know everything that was presented. Specifically speaking about the 2021 trial with Drake's 15-year-old accuser, I think it's very scary that there are TikToks with millions of views that have determined the total guilt of Drake's accuser and the total innocence of Drake. But what happened there was that Drake pled guilty in pretrial to avoid going to trial. And you guys know this happens all the time. This happened with Jeffrey Epstein back in 2006. Happens constantly, where somebody who is accused of very serious crimes will, in an effort to avoid facing a much harsher sentence, plead guilty to lesser crimes during pretrial so they don't have to go through all that.
Yeah.
And it's as if that is totally forgotten. And a TikTok video with 8 million views that is saying without doubt that Drake Bell didn't know the age of his accuser, that Drake Bell did not sexually assault this girl, and basing it off of very limited information that is available to us.
I think rage in itself just does better online. I think the idea of internet blood sports and how things constantly have to be adversarial in order to go viral tends to overtake these more nuanced conversations. The lack of media literacy in order to understand all of the facts of the story and everything that's going on is a lot more difficult than watching a 60-second TikTok that basically confirms your biases and is able to just explain what you want to hear in the story. It's what makes covering these stories so difficult, because there's so much noise. Especially on these like less larger things, even in smaller situations like the Minecraft community, or what's going on in the YouTuber world, like with Mama Max. These sort of things that like they kind of get so loud with the YouTubers who have the millions of views and the communities that are willing to share that content. It can be harder to find what's actually going on in these situations. I think with Drake specifically, he himself is getting into the trenches and is deciding that he wants to get involved.
Yes, I would love for you to talk about that, because you specifically in your piece mentioned the conspiracy video that he or someone on his team had to have embedded at the end of his music video that he dropped the day after Quiet on Set. And now I know that this might appear to be too cynical, but I also think that there is some truth to it, that Drake Bell is using the Quiet on Set docuseries and the newfound positive attention he is getting from it for being a victim of child abuse to relaunch his career. Like, this is the Drake Bell comeback now. After it seemed as if he was totally smoked, now he is able to use this not only to bury his previous allegations and the trial of which the pre-trial of which he pled guilty to. He is now, it's like positive PR for him.
I mean, absolutely. I agree in the more cynical sense of looking at the situation. It does seem like that. But if you look at, he's uploading on TikTok more, he's uploading on YouTube more, like he's more involved with his social media is outside of appealing to his Mexican fans, which is what he's been doing a lot of over the past 2 years. I don't know why I decided to watch Drake Bell's music video, but something compelled me to just watch I Kind of Relate. And then at the end, it just pops up Matt Wallace's face. Matt Wallace, I didn't really know who he was before this, but he has over 1 million followers on Twitter,
Yeah.
and he spins absolute
Yeah.
conspiracy theory nonsense over and over and over. It's rare to find Snopes calling someone a straight up conspiracy theorist.
Mm-hmm.
But there it was. In the video, he manages to find these two women. One was a photographer, and one claimed to be a friend of the aunt of the victim. And they were just like, it didn't happen. And then they spend most of the time talking about how Brian Peck is a pedophile.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why Drake decided, or member of his team decided to embed that video at the end. But if you just watch it in a vacuum, it can seem legitimate. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
know about Wallace's conspiracy theory past, or if you know, just assume that these women are telling the truth because, as one of them says, why would I lie? It just doesn't make any sense. I actually found right before this call, he switched the video out to an even more weird video.
Oh,
Um,
strange.
to someone who has like 13K subs and just is talking about she's this guy's basically like dissecting the woman's testimony, the 2021 victim,
Yeah.
just calling her nonsense without any evidence. And
Huh.
now it's featured on this music video with nearly 2 million views, and it's quickly growing on his channel because people are being funneled into it.
Yes.
Because I don't know why Bell is doing these things, but it seems like, as you mentioned before, this is an attempt to try and reinvigorate his image and make it a little nicer.
It is a little bizarre that somebody like him is seemingly searching his name or trying to find anything that is dispelling his accusers, calling them liars, smearing them in ways that he knows that he has to toe the line on, that he can't come out and say, oh, the girl who accused me and that I had to plead guilty to these crimes was just a total liar, that this was set up by Brian Peck. Can't you guys? He can't say that. But what he can do is push conspiracy videos like Matt Wallace's that is saying that.
I actually think Drake has been
No, go
saying
ahead.
that he is innocent and this girl was a groupie. He hasn't done a lot of interviews, but if you listen to like one he did with like I think it was like it was a Mexican account as far as I know, and he basically says the woman was a liar.
Oh, okay.
He has been pushing that narrative. It's just now he's trying to find other people to do it for him, which is how the internet works. Misinformation gets spread, it gets aggregated by someone else, and then 4 YouTube videos down the road, you have a grainy video claiming that it's debunked the situation because it's been a long line of aggregation.
Yeah, I looked into Matt Wallace as well, and just an example for people who weren't in here earlier when I brought it up. He's a guy who, when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed, he talked about how it was Barack Obama's doing, about how 5 months ago, Barack Obama released a film where a bridge like, this is the type of guy that we're talking about. These are the types of conspiracies that we were talking about, of which Drake is now pushing and of which his supporters are pushing to rewrite the narrative on him, to ensure that he has as strong of a comeback and a second career as possible.
It is so reminiscent of the way that the Depp Heard trial played out over the past 5 years that it almost seems obvious that Drake is like pulling pointers from how that whole case played out. And we've seen numerous men in his position do the same thing. And it's the same thing that you brought up, Caroline, because you see Amber Heard 2.0 written in the comment sections. And so that rhetoric is very transparent. But some of the hallmarks of what this like playbook has evolved to become, some of like the repeat tactics that you see over and over again with Johnny Depp, he had way more plausible deniability than Drake Bell does because Depp was removed from the online world. Depp didn't need to have his own account commenting on these TikToks or linking to these conspiracy videos. He had people who could do that for him. And he had lawyers and PR people who could put all these dominoes into place so that Johnny Depp's hands never got dirty. But it was the same exact kind of thing. With Johnny Depp's case, there were YouTubers who kind of came out of nowhere who had been given access to all of these audio recordings from Amber and Depp's relationship. And they could chop up these audio recordings and put false transcripts over them and make people believe whatever they want. And you saw those things go hugely viral, like hundreds of million, if not billions of views. In this case, Drake, he doesn't have the sophistication that the Johnny Depp campaign did. So he's just embedding the YouTube video into his own YouTube video, or he's on his official account in the TikTok comments saying like, no, that's not true. Like, watch this, or like, she never did this. And a lot of what this is able to rely on are two things. One, it relies on the public not understanding the complexities of the legal system, which again is totally fair. I don't understand all the complexities of the legal system. I don't have a law degree. I still have to Google like what's the difference between like a pretrial hearing and an active case. Like I still have to figure out what these various things mean. So they're taking advantage of that. They're taking advantage of the lack of knowledge to create like this is what you said, Stephen, like a narrative that is very appealing to these people that fits their previous worldview, and they just spoon feed them that narrative. The other thing that Bell and Depp and all these other guys take advantage of is that there's not a lot of mainstream media coverage of this. Most mainstream reporters don't know that like YouTube is this whole world where you have all of these conspiracies that really affect people. I think that mainstream reporters are aware that like Quiet on Set was viewed 60 million times, but they don't know that Drake Bell is pushing cryptocurrency on Twitter. If you surveyed like 20 mainstream journalists, I can guarantee that like not even a single one of them would know that.
Yeah, that was very surprising when I haven't been to his Twitter in a while, I guess, and I went to check it out when I was watching Quiet on Set, and I knew that he had responded to the Ned's Declassified cast, and I went, oh, he's pushing cryptocurrency. I guess that's what he's been doing, perhaps because his career was not what it was once upon a time, and so now he had to pivot to do something else, but potentially he's having a comeback here. I mean, his music video has almost 2 million views. I can't imagine that he would have gotten that before without the Quiet on Set docuseries, and that's why he released it the day after. So I think it is just one of those things that we can expect after the Amber and Johnny case, that anytime a woman accuses a man of assault or abuse, that there are going to be comments, there are going to be TikToks that that compare that woman or refer to her as Amber 2.0. Like, this just seems to be part of our lexicon now. Like, that is never going away, but it's really dangerous because it's happening every single time, and it's such a Pavlovian thing for people now, where we don't need to get into the whole Amber Johnny thing, and in fact I really don't want to, but there's a lot of people now who they see, oh, this is Amber 2.0, they don't know anything that's going on, and they have all of these automatic assumptions, or they then believe automatically, oh, Drake Bell is being, is being falsely accused, or they don't know really any of the details and are not able to look into it for themselves and consider all of the stories and consider his pattern of behavior. They simply go, oh, Amber 2.0, I know what's going on here. He's totally innocent. Like, that's it.
I think as YouTubers have slowly crept into the place that traditional media once stood, where people would get their news from journalists back in the days when newspapers mattered, YouTubers have, as I said, filled that void. And I can say a good majority don't do the proper research needed to actually, distill this information. contact sources, contact police, really figure out the whole scope of the situation. Because if you're looking at daily posters, they have content that they need to get out every 45 minutes. And if it's not on the Twitter feed or on the YouTube feed, it doesn't do as well. So when you don't have that level of media literacy, as I mentioned before, because of these content creators, this sort of conspiracy theories tend to go wild. And it's a lot easier to just believe a single thing that Drake Bell is innocent because I liked him as a kid, rather than a more nuanced take that someone could be an abused person as well as an abuser later in life. It's just a bit too complicated for the average, Facebook scroller or YouTube Shorts viewer to really be able to register in the amount of time needed to digest that information.
Part of me wonders if Drake Bell had simply come out with his story, but he didn't have an entire court case where Brian Peck was convicted of lewd acts against a child, and they had his confession on tape, and like there was no doubting at all what happened to Drake. Like it was very concrete. I wonder if he didn't have that and instead had his his allegations and his story, and because it was something that unfortunately the cops or his parents and then the cops didn't find out about, and so they didn't pursue charges against Brian, what the public opinion on Drake would have been. Because I think this is such a prevailing problem with allegations of sexual assault, is that when they happen, and often they happen years after the fact, and so there is no court case. There is not always concrete evidence, or at least evidence that would appease the online mob. Then the credibility of the accusers is what is on, it's what the public is looking at. It's not the history, and it's not the the pattern of behavior of the accused. Instead, it's always the credibility of the accuser. And so I don't know, a part of me just feels like the reason that the response was so thoroughly supportive of Drake is, one, because it deals with Hollywood, another Hollywood abuse case, and two, because there was an actual trial and Brian Peck was convicted of specifically lewd acts against a child. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think that the fact that Brian Peck was convicted is what ultimately allowed Drake to come forward. And even with that, it obviously took many years for Drake to actually say, like, I was the John Doe. But I think about other male accusers in Hollywood who don't have that kind of a ruling on their side, and I think about the public reaction to them, and it's totally different. So like I think of Michael Jackson's accusers and how unseriously that they've been taken, and I think about Anthony Rapp against Kevin Spacey. He lost his recent judicial trial. Like, he came out on the other side, he was not supported, and so then you saw Kevin Spacey sort of brought back into the fold and defended again. But it's really insidious that if the person who is the victim is a man and he gets the conviction, like with the Drake Bell case, then people like trust the court. But with Drake Bell's victim, she's a young woman, and she also, it's not a strong conviction, it's not the same, but she does get this like judicial action in her favor, and people are still trying to undermine it. So I feel like there's a bit of a gendered response in how people sort of believe or like take into account the court decision. And I think that if you are a woman, even if you get the court on your side, people are still going to question that ruling. So it really does come back to the idea of like, what are people's preconceived biases? Because I think that another issue here is the court system is not perfect, not anywhere near perfect. And most victims will never even be in a courtroom, let alone like less than 1% of people get a conviction for the sexual crime that's perpetrated against them. So I think that by forcing everything to go through this lens of like, how did it play out in court? That's problematic to begin with. But even when you do get that conviction, the women aren't taken seriously, but the men are comparably seemingly taken more seriously.
Oh yeah, I think a recent example is Grace Jabari versus Jonathan Majors. I mean, there you go, another guilty, result, and yet a lot of people that I saw online were refusing to believe that that was the case. We're still smearing her as a liar. We're still supporting Jonathan Majors despite everything that had come out and the fact that he was convicted. Yeah, it is. I think you're right with, and see, this is where we get into a lot of nuances where so many of these things are true. So many things are true where when men tell their stories of being sexually assaulted, of how dismissed they are because of homophobia, because of the idea that, oh, you're lucky that a woman would have sex with you. We see this with female adult teachers who sexually abuse their minor students, and you see all these like joke responses about how, oh, I wish I was him. Oh, he's lucky. What's he complaining about? Where it's not taken seriously. But then it doesn't mean, though, that female accusers are taken seriously. It doesn't mean, like, there's just problems for different reasons. I mean, it does all relate to the same system, but all of these things are true. And yet then when a man who is a victim of assault, when his accuser is found guilty, there's less of a denial there from onlookers as there would be with women who are female accusers whose accused are convicted in the rare instance that happens.
Yes. Something that I feel like is constant across a lot of different sort of arenas right now, like when you look at a lot of culture war issues, part of what is going on is this idea that was born out of the 2010s, where in the 2010s, we saw a lot of progress. We saw the Me Too movement. We saw a lot of racial justice. We saw a lot of representational progress. So we started seeing people represented in movies, TV shows, video games, books, etc., who hadn't necessarily been given those rules before. But what we didn't see during the 2010s is we did not see massive institutional restructuring or massive change. We saw the awareness of the Me Too movement, but we didn't end up in a world where sexual violence victims are now all of a sudden getting justice. Things are still relatively the same in when you look at the institutions and sort of the systemic factors. Same thing with racial justice. Same things with all the areas of justice that were focused on in the 2010s. But somewhere around like the end of the 2010s, people got this idea in their heads that we accomplished everything. And there's no homophobia anymore. There's no sexism anymore. There's no racism anymore. It's all done now. And so that, if you have that false worldview at the core, that's where you get all of this then resulting behavior, where like another really popular thing I see in response all the time is like, when you see a case with like a woman in particular abusing a man, whether it's an adult woman and a male child, or a partnership where the woman is the one causing harm, she's the perpetrator. A lot of times people's response is like, switch the roles, and then it would be taken more seriously. And it's like, well, that's actually not true. And we know that that's not true. But a lot of people have this false perception that the 2010s solved everything.
Yep.
And so now what we're actually dealing with is we're in this reactionary period. We're in the reactionary 2020s. And in the reactionary 2020s, it seems like conservatism is actually like the minority and like powerless, but it's not. And so it's kind of like this false idea that we need to be there for the people in power because their power is stripped away from them, but it never really was. and then that's where all of this discourse stems from.
Won't we think of the people in power? When will they get their day in the sun?
I think when it comes to that, I when it like because we're seeing the absurdity with like the Gamergate 2 movement.
Oh yeah.
And the nonsense that DEI is ruining video games. And if you're only ingesting this sort of content where you feel that DEI is ruining video games because there's a black character in God of War, your whole worldview kind of shapes around it because you want to feel victimized.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these, manosphere style creators definitely try to make it seem like the world is ending and that all of these, woke movements are trying to ruin your privilege, when in reality, that isn't how the world works. But if you're only online and you're only consuming this stuff and spitting out that same vial, you're going to try and frame the world in that way. And to me, it just kind of seems like the internet is kind of consuming our minds in a way that we weren't prepared for.
Yeah.
And
oh God, it's not normal. This is not healthy. We were never meant to, as humans, we were never meant to exist this way. I truly believe this.
We were supposed to have like 6 people in our hunter-gatherer tribe, and we knew what the dude who catching bison was going to do, and that was it. But now we know what thousands of people are doing at all times, and their opinions matter to us for some reason.
Right.
Yes.
Man, it really does feel as if we are in the era of reactionary backlash to these movements that have been perceived to give advantages now to the people that they were intended on, on protecting, or on finally, giving opportunities to. So, for instance, the Me Too movement, this was supposed to be a movement so that female victims could finally be heard, could finally be taken seriously. But the backlash to that now has been, Me Too gave women advantages over men. We should feel sorry for men. And so therefore now all accusers in this time period that we're in. Oh, I think we lost Steven. See if he.
Sorry, I had to let the cat out.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I was like, was it me? I always
no.
It's me.
His name is Samson. He's adorable, but he loves ruining important conversations.
So does I'm surprised my dog's not in here. He usually does that as well. But anyway, so we're experiencing a backlash to the Me Too movement, and we see that everywhere, and we see that with the Drake Bell situation. And then DEI is another example where the perception is that DEI made it so that black people took all the jobs, made it so that now white people are disadvantaged because black people have taken everything, when that is still not the case. Like, both Me Too and both DEI have not made things equal, have not made women on equal footing to men or black people on equal footing to white people. It's just simply not the case. But because of the fact that both of these things simply exist, and because if you are only basing your perceptions off of what you're seeing online, then of course you're going to think, all of these men are being accused of assault and abuse simply because they're powerful men, and all of these white people are losing their jobs because of diversity initiatives.
Yeah.
Grug.
I think when it comes to, again, the content we consume, if you're watching Musk's dialogue when Elon screams about how DEI is ruining airplane pilots, and you have no airplane pilots in your life, and you're not going to do the research needed to look into that sort of stuff, you're just going to assume it to be true. And if you assume that the airplane pilots are being ruined by DEI, why not video games? It's BlackRock.
Why not the Francis Scott Key Bridge?
Yeah, exactly. Obama did it.
Did it.
It's all just these endless conspiracy theories that used to be saved for that one random guy in the bar that, you sort of listen to him, but the chemtrails aren't real, to now they have massive mainstream platforms that a lot of people are listening to and are getting their information from, even if you don't know it.
Mm.
Yes. One thing I think about a lot with like this current era of like the climate we're in is I think about like two steps forward, three steps back, because I think that it was inevitable that we would have the social progress that we saw in the 2010s and especially the late 2010s and the early, maybe, I guess, early 2020s, but it's messy. But I think that it was always inevitable that there was going to be a Me Too movement. And in the same breath, it was always inevitable that there was going to be a backlash to the Me Too movement. And
Mm-hmm.
where we are right now is we're right in the middle of that backlash. A conversation I had recently with a different survivor of a different public figure, they were telling me how there are certain complexities in today's environment. There are certain consequences of being a public facing survivor of a public figure that people have not really understood because people think that all the women and all the people, non-binary people, queer people, men, everyone who came forward during the Me Too movement, a lot of people seem to just think that those people like are doing great now. But if you actually talk to them, they have faced so much harassment and abuse for coming forward. And that's what people don't get. And that's what people don't understand that they're actually a part of. Like, I'm like, when you watch this TikTok video that's ripping apart Drake Bell's victim and you comment something or you
Mm-hmm.
share it, like, you're part of what is like holding survivors down.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize that they're a part of that. They don't realize it's happening. And I think even structurally, this has yet to really be understood because a lot of public facing survivors have tried to get therapy to talk about like their experiences. And their therapists don't really understand it
Yeah.
because it comes back to what we were just talking about. Like, we weren't meant to live in these online worlds where we're able to receive feedback from 1,000 people in 5 minutes and we're and our healthcare systems have not
Yeah.
even caught up to that. Like, our mental health care system hasn't even caught up to like, how do we deal with this is bad for the brain, this is bad for the body and the mind,
Mm-hmm.
but what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, and also how because we're online, we have access to so much information and things that can fill our worldview. And so with victims of sexual assault, as soon as we see a photo of them and they're drinking at a party or we see something about them that's a tweet that goes viral, that's whatever, a YouTube, a TikTok video, and it allows us to go, oh, okay, this person's not credible. Here's the evidence that I see online. Here, oh, look at this tweet of theirs from 5 years ago when supposedly they were being victimized by this person. This is evidence as to this person lacking credibility and therefore being a liar. And now my job is done.
Yeah.
Like,
People
yep.
think that
No, you go.
or I was going to say, people think that the more they learn about the victim or the alleged victim, like the more they'll understand the case. But what actually happens is that the more people learn, the more details they get, the less they believe the person, like the less they believe the alleged victim. When victims come forward anonymously, they are far more likely to be more believed, have a better time, have a better experience because people don't know who they are. So then they
Mm-hmm.
can't use that against them. Like, people think that where's the evidence? Where's the facts? Like, if I can see the whole picture, then I'll have the best conclusion or the best opinion possible. But what we actually see happen is that people just take all of this new information and they use it to undermine the accuser.
Yeah, if you're able to like rip apart this person's story in any single way, it completely diminishes their case in their mind. It's the idea of the perfect victim, how they
Mm-hmm.
basically
Yes.
have to be, sad all the time because they had a horrible experience. So it should shape every instance. And the fact that they were dancing at a party diminishes it.
God
Like,
forbid. Yeah,
you
guys,
know,
don't ever dance at a party. Just in case it comes back to haunt you. Not for like being embarrassing, but for totally diminishing your credibility.
yeah,
Yeah.
hide it on Facebook at all costs.
That was the thing with Grace Jabari, was it was like she went after the incident occurred, she like went to a club with some strangers. People were like, a woman would never go to the club. And I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, it's New York.
Okay, before we end here, I am gonna open the floor to my community to ask a couple questions for you guys, and then we will wrap up here. So, okay, community, good questions, please. Thoughtful questions. If you got them, put them in chat. And it can be about, you know, if you read their pieces and there was something that we didn't discuss or anything that was brought up today, or whatever. What do we got? Anybody? Can we see the cat again? God damn it. God damn it, Sarah.
I knew Samson would take everyone's attention. There's no way around it. He's too cute.
Asking the important questions.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Is there any guidance for reporters to follow certain journalistic standards when reporting on sexual assault?
Yeah. I'll let Kat take that one.
That's a great question. I think that, so for me, I have kind of sought out these sorts of standards because really I would say no. I would say that there are resources out there that as a reporter you can look for. And some of those have been really helpful to me. But in general, no. In general, most newsrooms, I would say, are actually relatively unequipped for this type of coverage. Like, you have to have reporters who are individually interested in telling these kinds of stories and telling them well. If you don't, then unfortunately, what I see a lot of the time is mainstream media does a lot of disservices to these kinds of stories because of a lot of the complexities we just talked about. But I will say, if anyone is interested in like kind of what those types of guidelines or principles would look like, there is an organization that accredits victims advocates. So if you just search like victims advocacy classes or victims advocacy like guidelines, this resource will pop up, and they have guidelines that they've been working on since the late 90s. Like, they created them in 1995. They were last updated in 2021. And within those guidelines, there are things, they're not tailored for journalists. They're tailored for anyone who works with victims. But those have been really helpful to me personally.
Good to know. Okay, next question. What is the best way to approach these types of allegations as a viewer?
I think, I guess we'll stick with this specific Drake Bell legal case. I would say take one step further than the TikTok video. You know, look what the TikTok video is citing. Look into those videos. Try to consume media with a little bit of, you know, that there's a danger to it. You know, you don't know necessarily what someone is saying is 100% factual. And you should never just assume what the YouTuber or the TikToker or even the Twitch streamer is telling you is 100% fact.
Yeah. Twitch streamer, I tell you guys this, okay? I'm not perfect. Don't always take my word as the word of God as much as I do think I am the Lord. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think, you know, most of them try to do their due diligence and understand, but like everyone is a fallacy. Like when Kat and I are working on a story, there are a series of editors and red tape that we have to go through in order to get anything published. You know, I can't just say a thing unless I'm on camera and assume it's fact. So that's what I would say, is just try to consume a little bit more and, you know, be a bit more skeptical of what your favorite creator is saying.
Yeah, I always emphasize media literacy. Go ahead, Kat.
Yeah, I would also say, like, there are so many abuse cases that make the news that you should never feel like you are required to weigh in. And even personally, like, I know that if I am looking at this kind of stuff all day long, every day, I'm going to be depressed. I'm going to be really depressed. So I'm like, it's depressing. It's horrible. So I'm like, sometimes I see allegations and I'm just like, that case, I'm not going to look into it. Like, I'm going to be aware of it, but I'm not going to, like, I know that I already have so much on my plate with these other cases that I'm not going to weigh in on Like, I'm not going to weigh in on it with my platform. It's something that I'll be peripherally aware of, but I'm not going to try to do anything that's going to influence people's perceptions around this case, because I can't take on the responsibility of figuring out what's going on here. And I think that with social media, it's just so easy to weigh in on everything all the time. And because of that, people end up perpetuating harm, unfortunately, spreading misinformation, saying things that aren't true. So I would just say, like, if you don't have to weigh in on these things at all, but if you do want to, it's a good feeling to want to like understand a case like this. It's a good feeling to want to like get to the bottom of something and stand on the right side of an issue. So I would just make sure, like Steven said, actually do that. And actually go find the primary documentation, like go find whatever it is that people are basing their opinions off of, and evaluate that to make sure that you have the facts right.
Yeah, I had a couple questions saying, like, what is the best way to approach the discourse online about Drake Bell, you know, surrounding him, his misinformation, without helping push the narrative he's trying to create? Because I think what happens is a lot of people who don't feel comfortable in expressing a very affirmed position one way or another don't see anything. And so what will happen is that the TikTok's getting 8 million views that say Drake Bell is innocent. That is taking up all the oxygen, and there's no pushback to that. Yep. Which I understand, because the people who aren't doing those things are more focused on being responsible and going, I don't feel comfortable doing a Twitter thread here, or making a TikTok and pushing back on this thing. So I'm just gonna not say anything. Like, I do understand. I do understand feeling that way, because it is, at the end of the day, more responsible than making a TikTok saying this person is absolutely innocent and here's why I think so. But pushing that as fact. Yeah.
I think you don't always have to have an opinion, just in general, you know?
What?
I think in the internet, we're all subjected to everyone's opinions at all time.
Okay, well, my opinion is that's not true. I'm just
okay.
Joking.
Hands up.
We need takes every minute of every day.
That's why I could never be a Twitch streamer. I don't, my brain doesn't, it has dumb ideas at least 10% of the time.
Yeah, me too.
It doesn't need to be heard.
What that person was getting at, there is like another important thread there, and it sounds like the opposite of what I just said, but it is also true that if everybody doesn't weigh in, then only the malicious bad actors will weigh in, and they'll take up all the airspace. So what I would also say is, you know, these issues are really important, and even though I don't think anyone should try or be expected to be talking about them all the time and be in the right on every single thing, I do think it's important that, like, if you see a victim being smeared, at the one thing that you can do without having to like go out of your way to create new content is there's always, even with like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, when there were like 5 people like from like supporting Amber Heard, it's like find those 5 people, like find the few people who are understanding the issue and like retweet them, like platform them, so that there is like some pushback in the noise. But yeah, it's complicated. I think that it takes a lot of group change versus just like each individual changing. But I think that the fact that people are even thinking about that is a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay, last question here. Do you feel like Quiet on Set should have had Bell mention his past actions? Some people say not mentioning Bell's actions dismissed his own demons, but I've seen others say that diving into the issue would have deterred from what Bell was trying to share about his experience with Peck. Yeah, it certainly is not hard to see the hypocrisy in the documentarians wanting to tell this story of abuse, but making sure that they brush very quickly over Drake's own accusations. But I also understand not wanting to detract from these stories about Nickelodeon and Dan Schneider and Brian Peck specifically. But it is something where it felt, it felt not great. And Drake's the only, Drake has a huge platform there and was able to use that to quickly make sure that that people understand that the stuff on him out there is misinformation.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Quiet on Set, and I think investigation discovery docuseries in general, I don't know if it's the same executives, but I assume it's the sort of same style of executive. When I worked on the Onision doc, I got a look into how they really make docuseries, and it's less about trying to tell a story like a journalist and more about trying to get as many sensationalized TikTok clips as possible. The goal is to have people consume this media as much as possible, not necessarily get the whole scope of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
when I dealt with my docuseries, it was with Chris Hansen, the pedo hunter guy, who most recently had like a Kickstarter scam that
Mm.
sort of fell through. But the docuseries did not mention any of that. Didn't want to touch any of that. Chris Hansen was framed as just the pedo hunter guy. Ignore all those allegations
The
because
pedo
that
hunter.
wasn't the point of the show.
Yeah.
The and I feel like when I watched Quiet on Set, it sort of had that same problem where it wanted
Yeah.
to just talk about what they wanted to talk about. And if anything would make their speakers look, if anything would take the focus off of the anything that would take the focus off of the main story, it was kind of pushed to the side,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
is kind of unfortunate, but that's how people make docuseries for television.
Yeah. I think that I'll be really intrigued to see how they handle this in their new episode that's coming out in a couple weeks or a week or so, because my guess is that they're not really going to address this stuff, which will kind of showcase that it's not really on their radar. But I think that even a few small changes could have made the docuseries a lot better, and it shows that like they weren't really thinking about the consequences of how they were framing Drake Bell. But I think even if they had dedicated like another 10 minutes
Mm-hmm.
after the Drake Bell stuff or during it to just kind of exposing these complexities, that would have made it a lot better. I also think that certain lines they included from Drake were really harmful. Like when he said that the media ran with misinformation to destroy him, I'm like, cut, like don't include that.
Mm-hmm.
Like don't
Mm-hmm.
include that because it's not true. And they didn't push back on it at all.
No,
But like
they
the
didn't.
main thing I want documentaries like this to do, that I am like begging them to do, even if it takes away 30 minutes of airtime across like the 4 hour series, I'm like, just get a single expert in like these matters who is a neutral third party who
Mm-hmm.
can explain the cycle of abuse and how trauma impacts the brain, and just bring in a little bit of the expertise that we have, because we have so much scholarly work over the past 3 decades in the fields of criminology and victimology, and people need to use it. Like you have this platform to 16 million people, bring in some of that expertise. Like that's what I really wish that the docuseries would do, and what future docuseries should do.
Yep. Yep. Well said. All right, you guys. Chat, I think we're gonna wrap that up there. I don't want to take more of their time. It is Saturday after all. And they live in New York City. Wait, Steven, are you in New York?
Yep.
Okay. I was like, look, there's life to be lived. So anyway, thank you so much. I have both of your links, your Twitter links, and then the links to your pieces are pinned at the top of my stream here. Is there anything else you guys like? Do you want to plug anything or any
No.
last
Read Passion
stuff?
Fruit.
Read Passion Fruit. Great. Yep. Read both of their
Thanks you
works.
for
Please
having us
follow them.
on.
Of
Yeah.
course. Of course. Thank you guys for doing this. Kat, as
Yeah.
always, it's so lovely to talk to you. Steven, it's great to meet you.
You too.
And your cat as well. So yeah, thank you guys for doing this. I will talk to you later, and keep up the great work and the great reporting. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Right.
Peace out.
Bye.
Oh, where am I? Hold on. There I am. Hello, guys. How are we doing? How is everyone? Are we good? That was incredible coverage, Caroline. Thanks for doing that. You're so welcome. I hope that was effective. I hope that we all learned something. I really just wanted to have this conversation because I think the narrative is being pushed so heavily towards the direction of Drake Bell is